Good morning, everybody. I'm Joshua Berg, the guest minister, and I am delighted to be here. I'm going to intersperse three different parts of the ceremony with my homily. So to start the ceremony, I want to mention something I noticed when I lived in Japan. I used to live in Japan in the late 1980s, and I distinctly remember the sound of the Shinkansen, and that's Japan's bullet train. And that sound as it exited a tunnel, it was memorable because of its sheer volume. There was this burst of noise when it came out of the tunnel, and it was so loud that it could be heard 400 meters away. And especially in crowded residential settings, which is much of Japan, this sound was very troublesome of this bullet train exiting a tunnel. If you live in Japan now, however, you probably wouldn't know what I'm referring to, because a team of engineers led by Eiji Nakatsu fixed the problem. How did they do that? Well, Nakatsu-san, Mr. Nakatsu, just happened to be a bird watcher. The new design of the train, of the bullet train, was influenced by the serrations and the curvatures of owl feathers. And it was influenced by the hydrodynamic body of the Adelia penguin. And it was influenced, and I'm going to share my screen right now so you can see, it was influenced by the one-of-a-kind beak, the bill of the kingfisher bird. It was actually modeled after the bill of the kingfisher bird. And that beak of the kingfisher, it allows the bird to zoom down and pierce water as it dives for its prey, causing barely a ripple in the water, almost making no ripples. So consequently, the newly designed Shinkansen, designed after the owl and the penguin and the kingfisher, it was faster, it used less electricity, and it was much quieter, most notably when exiting tunnels. Now, the author, Janine Benyus, she coined a term for this type of engineering and design inspired by nature. It's called biomimicry. And today, biomimetic innovations are used in computing, in energy production, in health and medicine, in the military, in sports, business management, manufacturing, civil planning, countless other applications. I could go on. Biomimetic design. And it's not just about function, like the bullet train, but nature also produces some of the most incredible artwork, which enriches human lives if we are mindful enough to notice it. With almost 4 billion years of research and development, it makes sense that the natural world is a fount for great ideas. And that biomimetic design of art is where we're going to start our flower ceremony. So to begin our ceremony today, we will pay homage to the beauty of nature with a bit of our own biomimetic design. Now, this ceremony, as I said, there will be 3 options to participate in the ceremony. So if you don't want to join in this part, or the second part, or the third part, or any of them, or all of them, as you wish, that's okay. Your presence of spirit is equally important, and you will get, after this, 2 more opportunities to participate if you want. The first opportunities, in the auditorium, you're going to find some tissue and pipe cleaners. And some of you at home were actually mailed tissue and pipe cleaners. We're doing this as an experiment for the first time. If you don't have tissue and pipe cleaners, if you have a pen and paper or pencil and paper, if you have any sort of writing instrument, if you can write on your smartphone, whatever you want to do, please take out, I'm going to ask you in a moment to get those tools. I'd like you to then take them and imagine a flower in your mind. Imagine its beauty. Imagine its spirit. And once you have it in your mind, I'd like you then to recreate it using these materials and tools, the tissue and the pipe cleaners and the drawing utensils. And I'd like you to do this as we listen to hymn number 170, which is "We Are a Gentle, Angry People." And while you're doing it, and in listening to this hymn, please consider the spirit we share with all life as you create this biomimetic design. Consider So many lives we share spirit with, including the lives lost in the Pulse Massacre. Let's create these flowers that we're creating jointly with nature to honor all those spirits whose physical presence leaves us too soon, but whose spirit enriches our lives forever. And representing the spirit in these flowers. And then once you make the flower or the drawing, please keep your flower art to use later in the ceremony. So we depend on nature in many ways for our existence. I mentioned biomimicry, we can learn from nature, but we depend on nature for so many things. But unfortunately, it's not just dependence, but it's often theft as well. Unfortunately, much of humanity attempts to control nature, to tame nature, with concern only for our own benefit. And it therefore behooves us to keep in mind one way nature and humanity are very similar. We both have a tendency to resist being controlled. We should remember that. Weeds grow resistant to herbicides. Viruses, unfortunately, grow resistant to vaccines. In where I live in Los Angeles, coyotes have invaded suburbia because of overdevelopment, resisting control. Rats, for instance, in the New York subways develop resistance to poison. And some animals resist human control by going extinct. Environment too. The natural environment resists control. Tsunamis, melting glaciers, heat waves, more resulting from man-made global warming. In that way, nature also resists. And if humans want to continue to live and to thrive, we must coexist in harmony with, instead of taking advantage of nature. And that is all darn good justification for our seventh principle, respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. And so Unitarian Universalism understands that, as the theologian and Nobel laureate Albert Schweitzer wrote, he wrote, by ethical conduct toward all creatures, we enter into a spiritual relationship with the universe. And ethical conduct, it can be achieved by using our human ability of self-awareness and rationalization to understand how much we need nature, by using our human tendency to elevate that which we consider meaningful in order to love all of nature. In his book, Influence, The Psychology of Persuasion, Robert Cialdini talks about something called the rule of reciprocation. And this is human beings' natural inclination to reciprocate when we're given a gift. And as with many human needs, this too has evolved because sharing with each other, giving gifts, including gifts, necessities, and special abilities, sharing all these things with each other serves to reset the harmony of our species. Reciprocation facilitates living and thriving together in relative peace. When someone gives us something, we've been socialized to want to show appreciation and to feel bad if we don't. Given that need to share that keeps us alive, why does much of society take, often with abandon, the abundant gifts given by the natural world and not feel the same need to give back? Indeed, many feel it is our right to use our planet for our benefit, with little, if any, concern for its health and well-being. Changing that mindset can be done if we reset our heart and our spirit. That's the idea of eco-theology, connecting in spirit to nature, religious naturalism. Speaking of that, the author and professor Ursula Goodenough, who, by the way, I met virtually because she received an honorary doctorate just this last month from my alma mater, Meadville Lombard, when I graduated. So we technically graduated at the same time. She's one of the most renowned advocates of religious naturalism, Professor Goodenough. Which is a form of eco-theology. And she writes in her book, The Sacred Depths of Nature, that religious naturalism is about suggesting ways that a scientific understanding of nature can, quote, call forth appealing and abiding religious responses. If, she writes, religious emotions, spiritual connection can be elicited by natural reality, then the story of nature has the potential to serve as the cosmos for the global ethos that we need to articulate. And undertaking that project can only be done if, she says, quote, we all experience a solemn gratitude that we exist at all, that we share a reverence for how life works, and that we acknowledge a deep and complex imperative that all life continues. What does all that mean? What is this cosmos for the global ethos? Well, essentially, what religious naturalism says, what Ursula Goodenough says, what eco-theology says is we must recognize all of the natural world as divine, not necessarily in the image of any God, unless that's what you believe, not necessarily created by any God, unless that's what you believe, but we must recognize it as divinity itself, with that genuine connection of spirit between humans and the natural world, of which we are an equal part. This mutualistic symbiosis, too, is understood as divine. Our connection is understood as divine, as that which must be honored. We understand more clearly that not only does symbiotic consonance, living in harmony, sustain life, but the parasitic dissonance, the way we try to control life, will absolutely destroy it. And when we enter into this spiritual relationship with all of nature, when we feel this deep abiding gratitude, when we recognize it is indeed a gift we are given, then we can no longer take it for granted. Then the reciprocity instinct kicks in, and subsequently, we feel the need to then return the gift by caring for our world and all life upon it. And with that in mind, I'm going to continue to the second part of our flower ceremony with a recognition of our spiritual connection within our community and within all of nature, that divine connection that we have. So if you're participating online and you're able, at this time, please turn on your camera and your gallery view so that you can see people, and I'll show you the sanctuary, but also everybody else. And I'd like you to lift up your flower on the screen. If you brought a real flower like I did, or the flower that you made, your drawing or your tissue flower, lift it up on the screen. And as you display yours, what I'd like you to do, look around at the gallery and take in another participant's window. Visually take in another person's flower. As we do this online, those in the sanctuary, once again, we're going to do this when the hymn plays. So we're going to start in a moment, but what I'm going to ask you to do is in turn, and maybe Diana can help lead this, each person one at a time in turn, I'd like you to approach the communal collection of flowers, approach the table at the front with flowers. And when you do so, I'd like you to do so quietly and reverently with a sense of how important it is for each of us to address our world and one another with gentleness, with justice, with love, with mutual spirit. And then when you approach, I'd ask that if you brought a living flower, or if you have your tissue flower or your drawing, either one, place yours with the rest on the table, and then select a different flower, some other flower, and note its particular beauty. And please handle it carefully, because that new flower that you're going to take represents the unique humanity of another person and another life and nature, as well as the respect for the interdependent web of existence, and therefore deserves your kindest respect. So please begin one at a time, giving and taking your flowers, sharing on screen, whether it's the tissue flower, the drawing flower, or a real flower, as we listen to the next hymn, number 305, De Colores. It's amazing to see all the people, all the beautiful flowers online, and everybody in person. There's so many, which is a blessing. So thank you all so much. Now, I am certain that we can have this spiritual connection more comprehensively with nature. I know this because we already have many spiritual connections with nature. Now, how many people, for instance, have a pet that they would do anything for, this spiritual connection with your pet? How many people baby their plants with kid gloves, talk to them, sing to them, and even certain material objects like cars. Some people I know, if there's a deeper spiritual connection, we care for them like our own children. Many cultures elevate animals to the status of sacred. Indigenous fauna are honored for the protection they provide, their intelligence, their instinct, their support of society in so many ways. There are religions worldwide, including many indigenous cultural traditions that respect and honor nature significantly more than Western culture. And so we do have these connections. When these connections exist, the problem is, it is when the connection either doesn't exist or when our connection to the natural world is simply out of sight and out of mind, when we're not mindful of it, as is the case in much of Western culture with our busy lives. Then we become too distracted for instance, mindfully taking in the fleeting beauty of the cherry blossom, which blossoms only once a year for a month. Or we're too distracted to notice the butterfly flitting over our head. Or we're too stingy to pay $1 more to buy the cage-free eggs instead of the farmed eggs. And in these ways, in this stinginess, in this distraction and our addictions, we destroy ourselves. Human disregard for nature, as well as our unsustainable, this unhealthy, insatiable, these addictions we have, destroy the earth. As another example, beef farming. Beef farming can be helpful in certain ways, but in others, for instance, to the extent that exists in the United States, it takes up nearly half of the agricultural land in our country, but it accounts right now for only 12% of our protein intake, and it accounts for only 3% of our caloric intake. We could be finding much more environmentally friendly ways to farm beef. In fact, we could be exploring many more sustainable sources of protein altogether, save for our addiction to beef and our addiction to profit. We're careful to change the oil in that cherished car that I mentioned, or we're careful to make sure that that beloved pet I talked about gets plenty of exercise and rest and hydration. Yet, in the Western world mostly, we overuse the resources of our planet as if our Earth never needs a tune-up, or as if our Earth can't be overheated because until recently, the larger implications of that simply didn't touch our individual daily lives in a significant enough way, but they are starting to. The irony of all this is that in this age we live, in this Anthropocene, as it's called, literally that means the age of humanity, where it is assumed that human influence has come to dominate nature. We actually need her more than ever to survive. And when humans understand that it is not just some lives that are of value, but the entirety of the natural world, living and inanimate, we can recalibrate our thinking and our actions with love. Love meaning recognizing another individual and figuratively at least seeing through their eyes to the extent that it's possible. Now, inanimate objects occurring in nature obviously don't have eyes, with the possibility a possible exception of potatoes, of course, and non-human animals do not have our human equivalent of the ability for abstract reasoning or self-analysis. But those things aside, all life, indeed all of nature, does have needs, and it does give back to us. And additionally, we do recognize now more and more that non-human animals do feel hunger and thirst and pain and emotions like love and fear and distress, and often feel them deeply. Now, to be sure, the beauty I'm talking about of nature is not always beautiful. It's not always obvious. It's not, and sometimes not pretty at all. The natural world evolves as much through violence and through deaths and subjugation, annihilation, as it does through evolution or growth or rebirth or regeneration or peace. The cycle of life, similar to the rhythms and undulations of our own human sociological and anthropological cycles, it's never stagnant, it's never easy, and it's often, in our reflection, not beautiful. I would argue that it is, but we often consider it not. And then returning to nature as a teacher as well. We learn from her so much. What we learn from her is limitless and invaluable. We learn how to overcome challenges, what it is to love unconditionally, for instance. She models that even in the conflict and disorder and chaos of life, there is immense beauty. We understand better the very real struggle that is survival itself. And most vitally, we understand how to live and thrive together in peace. We watch a murmuration of swallows as they go through the air, or a colony of aspens, or mega shoals of herring in the sea living together in community. Whether it's the fragile impermanence of a single drop of dew in the morning, represented in the haiku of the Japanese poet Issa, that single drop of dew, the impermanent. Whether it's the importance of rest that's so cherished by the sea elephant. We understand all these things if we look at nature. If we, as the poet Reginald Holmes wrote, the earth has music for those who listen. And despite that, unfortunately, America, at least in the Western world, nature is yet another of our woefully undervalued teachers. Now, my talk today is not an admonishment to change the way humankind functions completely. It's not often practical for many to become completely vegan, for instance, if that's the change you're going to make, because often through no fault of their own, their health and their financial considerations, amongst others, that result from colonialism in the West, result from white supremacy culture that disallow people to easily become vegan, for instance. It's not always reasonable to expect us to quickly, easily, and completely dismantle and remake industry to become more eco-responsible. Now, these things are definitely desirable, and we definitely have no more time to work towards them. But as ideal as they may be, it's difficult. And what this talk is today is this. It's simply a request to develop a greater reverence for the natural world as we are able. And that includes virtually now. Heretofore and currently, this reverence has been stunted to the detriment of us all. This talk today is a plea to do this by nurturing a spiritual connection to the interdependent web of all existence, an eco-theological connection bolstered by love and respect, that we may proceed forward in steps toward an ever righter relationship with our world. I'll conclude with another quote from Albert Schweitzer, who wrote, quote, "The deeper we look into nature, the more we recognize that it is full of life, and the more profoundly we know that all life is a secret." We have to have that humility, and that we are united with all life that is nature. Humans can no longer live for themselves alone. We realize that all life is valuable and that we are united to all this life. That is what he wrote. And from this knowledge comes, he wrote, our spiritual relationship to the universe. So please, let us listen to nature's music as we listen to our beautiful hymns today, communing with nature, and understand how we must respect her, nature, our life partner and our greatest teacher. To conclude, we'll enter into the third part of our flower ceremony, and this might be a little hectic, but I talked about the beauty of disorder that in nature. I talked about the beauty of disorder that we must accept and welcome in as beautiful. So what I'm going to do to conclude our flower ceremony is something that we can simultaneously contribute to online and in person. It brings together our communities, the in-person existence, the online presence, our innovation learned from nature, and our natural world itself to present the divinity that is everything. Right. So the flower ceremony slideshow. When I change the slide again, it'll ask your app to give access to your phone camera. So please give access to your phone camera. And then you'll be asked either one to take a picture or to use a picture, hey, Christopher, already on your phone. So I'd like to ask you to take a picture of any flower that's in the room with you, or upload a picture from your phone of a flower. It could be the flower you're holding. It could be, you can walk up and take a picture of a flower in the memorial garden. Just take a picture of any flower you want. One's on the center table, one in your hand, one in your home, one in your yard or in our yard, and select one that's already on your phone's gallery. And would like you to then click submit and submit it through the app. We do, you can actually like different people's pictures. So I'll go through. Here's Sally. I'm going to tap here to like. There you go. I'm going to click through so we can get through all of them. Madeline. Awesome. Susie, look at, wow, that's quite a close-up. Looks like there's a bug on there. Dave, beautiful, beautiful. I wonder where that is. I want to go there. Gordon, oh, there's the tissue flower. Wow, some people artistic. Very nice. Mark D. Diana. Oh, did you take that today? That's beautiful. Look at that. Linda Gabeski. We're communing with nature. We're communing with technology. We're communing with each other. This is wonderful. Mosen. Oh, duotones. Karen and Amanda. Very cool. Ken, thank you. Liz. I want to get to everybody. Wow, that's pretty. Tracy Gadaris. It's interesting how they don't have the different emojis. It's just the like button, which is good. Margot Julian. Oh, Mary Mueller. I'm going to get some avocados and some tomatoes and some pears when I come to Michigan. Julie Bodson, beautiful flower. Alex at the piano. Wow, look at that. He played the piano and created a flower at the same time. That's pretty talented. Wow, Peter and Bob, I have never seen such a flower. You have to show me that when I come to Michigan. It's amazing. Jim. And that's me. I was given this flower when I left Emerson, and surprisingly, I'm keeping it alive. Brian. Flowers just ready to bloom. Nancy. All right. Amen. All right. Thank you so much, everybody, for participating in that. Hopefully you had as much fun as I did. All right. Let me see if I can stop sharing my screen. And I'm still spotlighted. I am. Wonderful. So before we conclude, I'd just like to offer a sort of a prayer. May the beauty of these flowers, represented in the flesh, created by us, biomimetic designs where we look at and we model nature and we are in spiritual sync with nature in the tissues, and also shared over the internet digitally. We can share nature spiritually, as well as the many stories that all of these flowers represent. May they remind us of the connection and commitment we have to each other and to all of nature, to thrive and to grow. The significance of this flower ceremony is that no two flowers are just alike, just as no two people are alike, yet each has a contribution to make, as well as does nature. And together, the different flowers and the natural world and humans together in sync and symbiosis with the natural world create a beautiful bouquet. Our common bouquet would not be the same without the unique addition of each and every individual flower. And thus it is with our church community. It would not be the same without each and every one of us.